So coming up now, we have our next guest presentation. We have Guerrilla Games. They're going to be taking us through a game many of you have probably heard of called Killzone 3. They're going to be showing us a little bit of what they did on that game for the cinematic side of things, looking at how they used Autodesk tools. So at this point, I'm just going to let you guys take it away and tell them what you got.
Thank you very much. So yeah, my name is Paul Spanning, and this is Marijn, my colleague at Guerrilla Games. We're going to talk you through some of the behind the scenes of the cinematics of Killzone 3. Before we do that, a quick introduction to who we are and what we've done. We've been around since 1999, and ever since 2005 we were part of Sony Computer Entertainment. And we've been sort of creating games for over a decade now. Or in our case, more precisely, we're creating one game for over a decade now. And that is the Killzone franchise. And for those of you that don't know it, it's basically a game about shooting red-eyed space Nazis. In this time, we've kind of seen 3 generations of console arrive on the market. And before we get into the actual talk, I'd like to show you a quick snippet of a presentation video we made for Sony in 1999 of what would later become Killzone 1. So that was 12 years ago, and the 3rd installment of Killzone looks like this.
I know what this nation needs. I will give you justice. Tomorrow we launch the greatest military campaign in our history. The ISA forces are in disarray. Within 3 hours, my forces will overwhelm them.
They're gonna find us. It's just a matter of time. Gotta keep moving.
General, the Higgs are knocking at our door.
All hostilities will cease immediately. Stand down and surrender.
I didn't come here to run from the Hellgas. Order the attack, you
My
coward!
priority is the lives of my men.
We've all seen what the Hellgas do to their prisoners. Where are we going? To finish what we started!
Where are the ISA? Why haven't you delivered your weapon prototype to the military? I will not place weapons of such magnitude into the hands of a total incompetent. This is an outrage!
Thank you. Well, I guess you can agree with me that we got quite far in those 12 years. Before we get into the actual cinematics, a quick look at a bit of the production pipeline that we had, because it was quite crazy for the cinematics of Killzone 3. And we basically finished Killzone 4 in November of 2008, and it launched in February of 2009. And by that time, we knew that Killzone 3 was going to be out for launch in February of 2011. So we basically had until November 2010 to work on it. Now for us, the concept and prototyping takes a considerable amount of time. And for example, building something like a drivable tank can take easily up to a year to make it work and make it fun. Now once we have enough prototypes, to start some of the levels, we're off on production for this. And the production for these levels lasts until the very end of the schedule. Literally the day before we start printing on disk, we might still be working on some of these. We usually start with about 3 levels or something, which is about a third of the game. And at this point, we don't really know what's going to end up into the final game. Some features might still fail, and there might be some quite big changes to the scope of the game. But even though the game isn't finished, we'll still have to commit to a story at some point. And that way we can get our cinematic process started. And that also means that while the scripts are being written, we're constantly adjusting them to take into account changes that have gone into the game. So one of the things we do is we very quickly go from script to a 2D animatic, and that way we can see the story as we're working on it, and players can get a rough idea of where their gameplay is taking them. And this is basically what that stage looked like. The dialogue is very mock-up and usually done by some of our in-house animators, but it gives us a pretty good idea of what we're going to work with.
The executioners are here.
Showtime. Hey there, I'm Jorham Stahl. I don't really do long speeches, so let me just give it to you straight.
Now, once we have a couple of scripts, we'll start a motion capture process. And that's, in our case, not a 2 or 3 week event where we capture everything, because what that would require is to get all the scripts done. And as I mentioned earlier, that's just not feasible. And with some of the levels not being designed yet, it's just we can't wait for all of them to be there. And since it might be sort of up until the last week of production for finishing levels, we can't wait for that, because we'll just leave it's not enough time for the cinematics. So our motion capture happens over sort of a 4 to 5 month period, usually about 10 sessions, each of them about 3 days long. And as you can see here, the mocap actually ends before the last scripts are written. And that's mostly because there's still ADR happening and in-game dialogues that are also part of the grand script. And these mocap sessions can get quite complicated because of those weird shooting schedules. So it's logistically basically impossible to lock all the actors for the same day. And that's why we spread shoots for single scenes over multiple sessions as well. The case we have here is we have Malcolm McDowell, who is playing the role of our main villain, Stahl, wasn't available for that particular shoot, even though he was in it. So we had to record his performance later, and as a stand-in, we actually used our main good guy. So he was playing the role of McDowell, in this case the body role. We would later fill in the facial capture for McDowell. And this is obviously not our ideal shooting schedule, but it's just technically and economically impossible for us to lock somebody like Malcolm down for the entire 4 to 5 month period.
We are prisoners of war! We have rights! You just violated the Stockholm Treaty!
Stockholm? What planet do you think you're on?
Chairman, the executioners are here.
Showtime. Good day, my fellow Hellions. I am Johann Stahl. This is something of a rarity for me, because speeches are not my forte. But honesty is. And I believe what I have to say today, you will find very refreshing.
So now that the mocap starts trickling in, we can start the actual production part of the cinematics. And as you can see, by this time, we have about 6 months left to do all 72 minutes of animation there. Now, we basically planned for this, and we have a sister studio in San Diego that we contracted to help us out. And they were basically responsible for all animation, scene assembly, and camera work. And then Guerrilla, we would focus on all the special effects, the lighting, and basically integrating the cinematics into our game engine. And aside from cleaning up all the mocap data and animating all the parts that we couldn't capture, San Diego studio also had a couple of InterSense virtual camera capture stages. And this has helped a lot and create a more cinematic feel, as we can hire professional directors of photography to do the camera layout. And then we're basically halfway through the production process for the cinematic, and we get something back that looks like this.
You guys the executioners? Right over there.
Captain Narville, do you know who I am? Typical.
We are prisoners of war! We have rights! You just violated the Stockholm Treaty!
Stockholm? What planet do you think you're on?
So after San Diego is done, we get it back and we get to bring it into the engine. It's already quite clear that the amount of time we have left at this point is very, very minimal. Altogether, we have about 6 to 7 months to do all the post-production on, as I said, 72 minutes of cinematics. But it's not so much a time constraint as our biggest issue. It's basically the enormous amount of stuff that's happening in parallel. Scripts aren't done yet, we're already in post-production. It's basically your producer's worst nightmare. So now when you get the final data back, as I said, we start putting it into the game. And the next slide will show you the final cinematic for the various parts in progress that we just showed you before.
And you guys the executioners. Right over there.
Captain Narville, do you know who I am? Typical.
We are prisoners of war! We have rights! You just violated the Stockholm Treaty!
Stockholm? What planet do you think you're on? Showtime.
We go live in 3.
So hi, my name is Marijn Giesbert. I'm lead effects at Guerrilla Games, and the video you see here, it shows you the process of the lighting of a shot of one of the cutscenes in Maya. So as Paulus mentioned, we have about 72 minutes of cutscenes, and all of the effects and lighting on these was done in the last couple of months of the project. And as you might have heard, our game engine is a deferred renderer, which gives us much more flexibility and speed during lighting than a traditional game engine. But an even bigger advantage is that it runs directly in the Maya viewport, and this allows us to add, copy and tweak the lighting of the scene in real time. Now the system only supports omnidirectional and spotlights, but we actually had a little need for more advanced lights. Also, as the system didn't support any real-time radiosity or radiance, we had to use secondary omni lights to create the illusion of bounce light. And the nice thing about the deferred render is that you can go pretty nuts with the amount of lights in your scene, as the system's performance is mostly dependent on how many lights you have per pixel. And that means you can have hundreds of lights in your scene while still remaining interactive. So this next video will show you some of the different passes of our lighting process. Killzone has always been known for its lighting, and the primary reason for this is that we put a lot of effort in getting the ambient values interesting. And to enable us to do that, we have always used Maya in combination with the cutting edge in rendering technology that was available to us. So on Killzone 1, we used Mental Ray, and on Killzone 2 and Killzone Liberation, that's our PSP title, we used Turtle. And for Killzone 3, we're using Sony's internal lighting solution. Now, we always try to get the maximum amount of details in our shadows and transition areas of the lighting, meaning that we work with hundreds of fill lights and ghost lighting to get gradients in the flat shadow areas to break up the evenness in the lighting. In a way, we really like to paint with light. So in the end, we bake out the solution to non-directional light maps for our static geometry. So that's all the building blocks and BSP. And the spherical harmonics data for our dynamic geometry. So that's all the characters, vehicles, and destructible objects. The spherical harmonics data is sampled from a point cloud-like data structure that we generate based on the waypoints and the geometry in the level. And this point cloud is not very dense, since we're limited to 2100 light probes on the PS3, but sufficient enough to get all the intricate lighting that exists in our light maps to be visible on our dynamic geometry as well. So while we make this base ambient lighting, we're also placing real-time lights to give extra punch to our lighting. But just looking at the levels with the light maps and the spherical harmonic data, it already looks really nice. So let's take a look at another cutscene, and after that I'll show you our color correction tools.
This is him. Report to Chairman Stahl that we have positive ID on both Narville and Sevchenko. Get up! Fuck off! Get up!
I said fuck off.
So the next video will show you our color correction tool, and it's been linked up to a dev kit, and we can tweak it and instantly see the results of that. So our color correction is applied pretty much as a filter, which allows us to have different settings per shot. So over here you can see that we're tweaking our shadow, midtone, and highlight colors. And the nice thing is that we can actually do this based on the depth of our scene. So different settings can be used over for different distances. So in this movie you'll see the closer objects, and they're toned more pinkish, and the further objects are more bluish. That's our. We also have the option of fogging, which you see over here. We can tweak also over the distance. We have the color correction settings for the transparent objects, and we can tweak the color of our environment cube maps. So, but besides these settings, there are some other post-process filters that we have. So, for example, the bloom settings that are being tweaked over here. And we also have the option of screen-based ambient occlusion. And not visible in this video, but also part of the post-processing is the vignetting and lens reflections. Next we'll show our particle editor, but before doing that, we'll take a look at another cutscene.
Damage report.
That last blast took out all electronics on G-Deck. Rerouting systems now.
What about the other cruisers?
The Dauntless has reported minor damage, and the Arcturus has safely reached orbit.
Thank God. Looks like we're going home. Tell Narville he's got to move now!
God damn, this isn't a drill! Get to your transport! Move! Shevchenko! Give me your hand. Where the hell is Rico? I don't know.
No, wait! What about Rico?
I'm sorry, Sev. Hey! Hey!
There's Rico!
Hey! Get to cover! Now! Nearly there.
This is Captain Narville contacting all surviving personnel. Retreat to emergency fallback locations. I repeat, emergency protocol 5-9 Echo is in effect. God help us.
So in the next video you will see the effect of this explosion loaded in our particle editor. So yeah, this is our particle editor, and yeah, one of the nice things about working on video games is the instant feedback that you get while you're tweaking values, and this really speeds up the process significantly. So our particle editor pretty much has all of the basic features that you'd expect. So you can set values for particle lifetime, we can change particle sizes, emission rates, rotation. It's pretty much all of the settings or options you expect from a particle editor. So let's take a look at a breakdown of the explosion. So for this particular effect, we've used about 30 particle systems, and we spawn about 2,500 particles. This particular effect was made for a cutscene, and the nice part from cutscenes like these is that we can really push our particle systems much further if needed. We don't have the same performance restrictions as we do with effects during gameplay, since all of the cutscenes that we do were rendered out to movies. Next, I'd like to take a closer look at the background of two shots. So the backgrounds of our cutscenes usually consisted of parts of the gameplay level geometry that we just copied over, and we adjusted that to work for each shot. But in some cases, like these two, it wasn't sufficient using the level geometry. So the areas we had to fill would become too large, and we needed to go for a different solution. So what we ended up doing was we created map paintings, and they were constructed from screenshots that we made of different parts of the level. And we then photoshopped them together and textured them to a plane. And in this case, we actually combined them with a couple of 3D elements, like the spaceship and the big robots and the little building over there. Because of the limited time that we had left to complete all of the cutscenes, we were really forced to do tricks like this. I remember our art director, JB, at one point he came up to me and he was quite frustrated. And he said that he'd been trying to color correct one of the shots for over an hour, and it didn't work because he wasn't able to do proper color corrections, but based on depth and all that, because it was a textured plane. And in a way, it was proof that the technique worked, because he only actually noticed it being flat when he started moving the camera around. But besides the color correction not working properly, I'm pretty sure that some of those shots don't work in 3D that well either. An important aspect to keep in mind with cinematics is that we're not working with footage. It's all live game content, and it remains an interactive three-dimensional scene throughout the whole process. So at any moment, we can take the camera and start walking through the scene. Now, if you would do that, you would see a lot of continuity issues. So characters would jump around, lights jump all over the place, effects suddenly pop in and out, and props appear out of nowhere, and sometimes whole sets even disappeared. It's quite bizarre looking. And this is also where a lot of our problems began, because any effect that is temporarily based will start looking quite broken in such discontinuous time. So motion blur would, for example, carry over from one shot to another. So every first frame was always blurred. Particle effects would carry over into the next shot, and lights from one shot would still turn on one frame too late. But the worst problem we had to do with was a legacy problem in our game logic that would only allow us to place events on every second frame, so at 15 frames per second instead of 30. Before we finally fixed this, animators had to spend an enormous amount of time rejigging all the camera cuts to happen on odd frames only. It's one of those things that we really didn't anticipate.
The last thing that we wanted to talk about with regards to cinematics was the stage of compositing. We hadn't really planned for doing any compositing because it's all rendered in engine, and we didn't really prepare for it. But unfortunately, the script in the end called out for some fairly complicated holographic systems that needed to go into the cinematic. And fortunately, because we rendered through a deferred render engine, we have the various buffers, so it's not that hard to take them into compositing in a software like Combustion or Maya Composite for that matter. And we're also able to extend our engine a little bit to extract some additional buffers for masking in the various layers. The main problem we ran into with the compositing was the 3D thing. Our game was one of the first 3D games, and we had to get a match between the in-game 3D camera and the Maya 3D camera that was used to render out the composites. In the end, it was just a matter of a couple of people doing very late nights with red and green goggles sitting behind their monitor looking at the Maya screen and trying to fudge it right. And I think we got it working. This is the final scene where you see the composite elements in use.
Try that one.
Test subject 212.
That's Earth. Jesus Christ.
We gotta tell Norville. Come on.
And that was it for our talk on the cinematics of Killzone 3. Thank you very much for listening. And let's see who won the video card.
Thank you very much.